Chapter 6, Chapter 7 of Penrod. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For information or to volunteer, visit www.librivox.org. Read by Jonathan Burchard, March 2009. Penrod by Booth Tarkington. Chapter 6, Evening. The sun was setting behind the back fence, though at a considerable distance, as Penrod Schofield approached that fence and looked thoughtfully up at the top of it, apparently having in mind some purpose to climb up and sit there. Debating this, he passed his fingers gently up and down the backs of his legs, and then something seemed to decide him not to sit anywhere. He leaned against the fence, sighed profoundly, and gazed at Duke, his wistful dog. The sigh was reminiscent. Episodes of simple pathos were passing before his inward eye. About the most painful was the vision of lovely Marjorie Jones, weeping with rage as the child Sir Lancelot was dragged, insatiate, from the prostrate and howling child Sir Galahad, after an onslaught delivered the precise instant the curtain began to fall upon the demoralized pageant. And then, oh pangs, oh woman, she slapped at the ruffian's cheek as he was led past her by a resentful janitor, and turning, flung her arms round the child Sir Galahad's neck.
"Penrod Schofield, don't you dare ever speak to me again as long as you live!"
Maurice's little white boots and gold tassels had done their work. At home, the late child Sir Lancelot was consigned to a locked clothes closet pending the arrival of his father. Mr. Schofield came, and, shortly thereafter, there was put into practice an old patriarchal custom. It is a custom of inconceivable antiquity, probably primordial, certainly prehistoric, but still in vogue in some remaining citadels of the ancient simplicities of the Republic. And now, therefore, in the dusk, Penrod leaned against the fence and sighed. His case is comparable to that of an adult who could have survived a similar experience. Looking back to the sawdust box, fancy pictures this comparable adult a serious and inventive writer engaged in congenial literary activities in a private retreat. We see this period marked by the creation of some of the most virile passages of a work dealing exclusively in red corpuscles and huge primal impulses. We see this thoughtful man dragged from his calm seclusion to a horrifying publicity, forced to adapt the stage, and himself a writer compelled to exploit the repulsive sentiments of an author not only personally distasteful to him, but whose whole method and school in belles lettres he despises. We see him reduced by desperation and modesty to stealing a pair of overalls. We conceive him to have ruined, then, his own reputation, and to have utterly disgraced his family. Next, to have engaged in the duello, and to have been spurned by his lady-love, thus lost to him, according to her own declaration, forever. Finally, we must behold imprisonment by the authorities, the third degree, and flagellation. We conceive our man decided that his career has been perhaps too eventful. Yet Penrod had condensed all of it into 8 hours. It appears that he had at least some shadowy perception of a recent fullness of life, for, as he leaned against the fence, gazing upon his wistful Duke, he sighed again and murmured aloud, "Well, hasn't this been a day!" But in a little while a star came out, freshly lighted from the highest part of the sky, and Penrod, looking up, noticed it casually and a little drowsily. He yawned. Then he sighed once more, but not reminiscently. Evening had come. The day was over. It was a sigh of pure ennui. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Evils of Drink. Next day, Penrod acquired a dime by a simple and antique process which was without doubt sometimes practised by the boys of Babylon. When the teacher of his class in Sunday school requested the weekly contribution, Penrod, fumbling honestly at first, in the wrong pockets, managed to look so embarrassed that the gentle lady told him not to mind, and said she was often forgetful herself. She was so sweet about it that, looking into the future, Penrod began to feel confident of a small but regular income. At the close of the afternoon services he did not go home, proceeded to squander the funds just withheld from China upon an orgy of the most pungently forbidden description. In a drug emporium near the church he purchased a 5-cent sack of candy consisting for the most part of the heavily flavored hoofs of horned cattle, but undeniably substantial, and so generously capable of resisting solution that the purchaser must needs be avaricious beyond reason who did not realize his money's worth. Equipped with this collation, Penrod contributed his remaining nickel to a picture show, countenanced upon the 7th day by the legal but not the moral authorities. Here, in cozy darkness, he placidly insulted his liver with jawbreaker upon jawbreaker from the paper sack, and in a surfeit of content watched the silent actors on the screen. One film made a lasting impression upon him. It depicted with relentless pathos the drunkard's progress, beginning with his conversion to beer in the company of loose travelling men, pursuing him through an inexplicable lapse into evening clothes in the society of some remarkably painful ladies, which, next exhibiting the effects of alcohol on the victim's domestic disposition, the unfortunate man was seen in the act of striking his wife and subsequently his pleading baby daughter with an abnormally heavy walking-stick. Their flight through the snow to seek the protection of a relative was shown, and finally the drunkard's picturesque behaviour at the portals of a madhouse. So fascinated was Penrod that he postponed his departure until this film came round again, by which time he had finished his unnatural repast and almost, but not quite, decided against following the profession of a drunkard when he grew up. Emerging, satiated, from the theatre, a public timepiece before a jeweller's shop confronted him with an unexpected dial and imminent perplexities. How was he to explain at home 3 hours of dalliance? There was a steadfast rule that he return direct from Sunday school, and Sunday rules were important, because on that day there was his father, always at home and at hand, perilously ready for action. One of the hardest conditions of boyhood is the almost continuous strain put upon the powers of invention by the constant and harassing necessity for explanations of every natural act. Proceeding homeward through the deepening twilight as rapidly as possible at a gait half skip and half canter, Penrod made up his mind in what manner he would account for his long delay, and, as he drew nearer, rehearsed in words the opening passage of his defence. "Now see here," he determined to begin, "I do not wish to be blamed for things I couldn't help, nor any other boy. I was going along the street by a cottage, and a lady put her head out of the window and said her husband was drunk and whipping her and her little girl, and she asked me wouldn't I come in and help hold him. So I went in and tried to get hold of this drunken lady's husband where he was whipping their baby daughter, but he wouldn't pay attention. And I told her I ought to be getting home, but she kept on asking me to stay." At this point he reached the corner of his own yard, where a coincidence not only checked the rehearsal of his eloquence, but halfully obviated the occasion for it. A cab from the station drew up in front of the gate, and there descended a troubled lady in black and a fragile little girl about 3. Mrs. Schofield rushed from the house and enfolded both in hospitable arms. They were Penrod's Aunt Clara and cousin, also Clara, from Dayton, Illinois, and in the flurry of their arrival everybody forgot to put Penrod to the question. It is doubtful, however, if he felt any relief. There may have been even a slight, unconscious disappointment, not altogether dissimilar to that of an actor deprived of a good part. In the course of some really necessary preparations for dinner he stepped from the bathroom into the pink and white bedchamber of his sister, and addressed her rather thickly through a towel. "When did Mamma find out Aunt Clara and Cousin Clara were coming?" "Not till she saw them from the window. She just happened to look out as they drove up. Aunt Clara telegraphed this morning, but it wasn't delivered." "How long they goin' to stay?" "I don't know." Penrod ceased to rub his shining face, and thoughtfully tossed the towel through the bathroom door. "Uncle John won't try to make 'em come home, I guess, will he?" Uncle John was Aunt Clara's husband, a successful manufacturer of stoves, and his lifelong regret was that he had not entered the Baptist ministry. He'll let him stay here quietly, won't he?" "What are you talking about?" demanded Margaret, turning from her mirror. "Uncle John sent them here. Why shouldn't he let them stay?" Penrod looked crestfallen. "Then he hasn't taken to drink?" "Certainly not." She emphasized the denial with a pretty peal of soprano laughter. "Then why," asked her brother gloomily, "did Aunt Clara look so worried when she got here?" "Good gracious! Don't people worry about anything except somebody's drinking? Where did you get such an idea?" "Well," he persisted, "you don't know it ain't that." She laughed again, wholeheartedly. "Poor Uncle John! He won't even allow grape juice or ginger ale in his house. They came because they were afraid little Clara might catch the measles. She's very delicate, and there's such an epidemic of measles among the children over in Dayton, the schools had to be closed. Uncle John got so worried that last night he dreamed about it, and this morning he couldn't stand it any longer, and packed them off over here, though he thinks it's wicked to travel on Sunday. And Aunt Clara was worried when she got here because they'd forgotten to check her trunk, and it will have to be sent by express. Now what in the name of the common sense put into your head that Uncle John had taken to—" "Oh, nothing." He turned lifelessly away and went downstairs, a newborn hope dying in his bosom. Life seems so needlessly dull sometimes. End of chapter 7.